Hello, so welcome everybody to the panel on therapist training and competencies. My name is Ido Simeon. I'll be moderating. Just a little bit about myself. I've been a MAPS therapist and clinical investigator on phase 2 and now phase 3. I'm also a trainer for the MAPS MDMA for PTSD and a trainer for the Hakomi Institute, which is experiential psychotherapy. So today we'll be in this talk, we'll be seeing Janice Phelps and Michael Mithoefer and Peter Gosser. So we will begin with Janice Phelps. So a few words of introduction. So Janice Phelps, she is a PhD, is a full professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, California. She served as the Dean of Faculty at CIES for the graduate department in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, has held faculty positions in the East-West Psychology Graduate Program, founded by Alan Watts, and Clinical Psychology Doctoral Program. She is currently the founder and director of the CIES Center for Psychedelic Therapies and Research, which conducts the first academically accredited professional certificate training program for psychedelic-assisted therapy and research. Dr. Phelps is a board member of the Hefter Research Institute, which has conducted psilocybin research since the 1990s. Her recent publications focus on the competencies and training of therapists in psychedelic-assisted therapies. Dr. Phelps is contributing to the development of a national accreditation board for therapists and to methods of scaling effective training programs to meeting the burgeoning need for well-trained mental health and medical professionals in the field of psychedelic medicine. Dr. Phelps maintains a private practice in Mill Valley, California. So welcome, Janice Phelps, Dr. Phelps.
Thank you so much, Ido. Well, I will start the presentations. We're doing a short presentation, each of us, so I'll have a few slides here to share with you. And I will give one of the shortest presentations I have ever done in my professional career. This is a wonderful challenge to have. So I'll give you this overview of our training program, and we'll jump right in. It's a 150-hour postgraduate certificate training program. It's the first university-approved training program. And it's 120 hours out of that 150 in the classroom, and that's both online and in person. Then we have 30 hours of required independent study, 14 of which is the MAPS Part A training, which Dr. Mithoefer will tell you more about. And we also have 16 hours of our trainees working with an expert mentor in the field and doing some individualized learning to increase their toolbox for doing psychedelic psychotherapy. We have 7 meetings over 8 months, 6 long weekends, 1 in-person retreat. And by the end of that retreat, the MAPS Part B and D will be completed. And we're really happy and excited about the generous collaboration that MAPS and CIS have done with one another. And this is the eligibility criteria. This is one of the things the organizers asked us to speak to. These people will, some of them be approved by the EMA and FDA, Health Canada, other regulatory bodies in other countries to be either the first or second facilitator therapist. We've expanded the range to include clergy because of the end of life studies that have been going on, and clergy and chaplains will be in demand for that. And these folks have an MDiv and have done 4 units of CPE, and that's some of the best training for a clergy person. Just to give you a sketch of the kinds of people we've had in our, we're in our 5th year. I should have told you that. We're in our 5th year. We're in the midst of training our 301st professional. You can see the range of the kinds of people we've had in the program. And their average years since licensure or ordainment is 16 years, average years 42. So these are not young people. They're people in their 70s who've joined this program. They've re-upped on their medical license to come into this program because they had actually retired but came out of retirement. Very impressive to do this work. 82 of the 301 professionals identify as a person of color. 58 identify as an LGBTQ+ person. So you have a nice range of people. Another question that was asked of us by the organizers to answer is whether we require our trainees to have had a psychedelic experience. And I'm sharing with you 4 of our 6 interview questions. The one at the bottom is specific to this, and we ask it in a very circumspect way, a very permissive way. Would you feel comfortable sharing about when you were in a non-ordinary state of awareness, and if and when it was with a psychedelic? And we say, you don't need to share this with us if you don't want to. It's not a requirement of the program, but it is an advantage for anyone who has had a previous experience to know the terrain, of course. So that's been our compromise. We don't require it, but as we've gone through our admissions procedures in the last 5 years, 99% of our admittees have had a psychedelic experience, at least one, and for some of them, many. And this is a picture of being with Michael and Annie Mithofer at our retreat last year. Wanted you to see the crew. And these are our curricular modules, what we focus on in our training. We go over the current types of protocols, randomized placebo studies, as well as some of the clinical case studies that have been coming out in the literature, which was the predominant method of study back in the 50s and 60s. We studied neuroscience and pharmacology. We're fortunate to have the chemists who've been working with MAPS and Hefter be our teachers, Dave Nichols and Nick Cozy and David Presti of UC Berkeley. We talk about ways in which humans have transformed their consciousnesses for millennia, including with psychedelics, but also meditation, solo vision, journeys out in the wilderness, yoga, Tai Chi, dance, etc. We talk a great bit about the therapist competencies and the therapeutic processes for this work with psychedelics, because for many medical docs and nurses and psychotherapists, it's unlearning some of what they learned in their graduate school or medical school. And it's emphasizing some things that weren't emphasized in their training, but were present in their training, because this is a specialization in the clinical world. We talk a great bit about mindfulness and contemplative practices. We encourage our trainees to have at least one practice they use for mindfulness, because it will help them in this work to be present with what's going on moment to moment. And we also want them to know about these practices so they can teach some to their clients in order to help their clients navigate through the psychedelic terrain. We have in vivo instruction using holotropic breathwork, role plays, guided imagery, and archival instruction with videotapes of sessions through Hefter researchers, archives, and what Michael and Annie and Marcella and Bruce, the MAPS trainers, supply and go over from their videotapes. Very, very good instruction to be able to see sessions. And then lastly, I've mentioned that we have mentoring with experts in the psychedelic field. Some of them are older than me, and some of them are new researchers who are in their 30s. We span that age range, and they come from all different areas in the clinical and research world in psychedelics. And these are the competencies we teach to. We want people to be growing their capacity to have empathy in an abiding presence where they're calm, they're equanimous, to use a Buddhist term, a Vedantic term, and they're able to be comfortable moment to moment with whatever's occurring in the prep, the session, and in the integration. We want them to know a great deal about enhancing the trust their clients have in their own therapeutic healing capacities, as well as being a trustworthy therapist who will build a therapeutic alliance. We teach them to learn, as I was saying earlier, mindfulness awareness. We talk about the transpersonal realms of consciousness, regardless of whether one of the trainees is a hard-boiled empiricist and doesn't really see levels of consciousness anything other than an epiphenomena of the brain. We have students who are in that realm philosophically, and then philosophically we have people in the other realm who know of psychedelics and entheogens as a sacred practice done in community with ceremony. So we find that middle ground of all are welcome, and we'd like people to know about both. And we talk about them learning the basics and some advanced knowledge of the physical and psychological effects of psychedelics. We want them to be very self-aware about taking care of themselves so they don't get vicariously traumatized. And the ethical integrity is particularly salient for every session, but particularly the sessions while the client is in an altered state. We talk a great deal about boundaries and taking care of what's needed for the client rather than what our own needs are at the moment. And then we encourage them to have a panoply of complementary techniques they can use both in prep and integration as well as in the sessions, coming from somatic, cognitive, and affective models. And then in conclusion, in addition to learning these competencies, the graduates are in an active engagement in helping these medicines be accessible to all socioeconomic groups. In countries without socialized medicine, this is going to be a great challenge because the number of hours needed for sufficient time with clients doing this work is quite large, and we encourage our students and give them some tools to be engaged in being a lobby for all peoples to have access to these medicines through insurers. They do a great deal of networking among the mentors and other grads to create research protocols together and establish clinics and readiness for legal use. We're teaching them about starting their own regional psychedelic research and clinical salons where they have speakers come in and they develop a journal club with one another to create community among practitioners. And then finally, we encourage them to use their influence as professionals in medicine and in mental health to help their country move away from institutionalized racism and sexism. We know this from experience. We don't have explicit data on it, but when someone leaves their treatment with a psychedelic, if they're going home to a toxic situation in their house or in their community, they're not going to be able to sufficiently integrate their psychedelic medicine. And we're not just about teaching about doing psychedelic medical work well, we're also asking our students to come forward as representatives of a new way of being in the world where democracy reigns, people are treated equitably, and everyone is at the right table so that we don't destroy our planet with more genocides. And we're really hopeful that psychedelics will help with that. So we're not just teaching our students about what to do in the treatment room. So that's my presentation. And if anyone wants to know about our training program, there's our email address. And thank you very much for your attention. I'll turn this back to Ido.
Thank you, Janice. So next will be Peter Gasser. So Peter is a medical doctor born in 1960, married with 3 children. He's a physician for psychiatry and psychotherapy working in private practice in Solothurn, Switzerland. He was trained in psychodynamic methods as well as in therapy with mind-altering drugs, including psycholytic and psychedelic therapy. He's a member of the Swiss Medical Society for Psycholytic Therapy since 1992, and its president since 1996. From 2008 to 2012, he conducted a randomized controlled trial with LSD-assisted treatment in patients suffering from life-threatening diseases. A second study with the same study questions is running from 2017 to 2021, will be running. In addition to that, Peter Gasser holds a number of individual permissions issued by the Swiss Federal Office for Public Health for the treatment with LSD or MDMA in the context of compassionate use. So welcome, Peter.
Yes, thank you for this kind introduction, Ido, and good afternoon, everybody. Here in Europe, it is evening. I do my presentation quite shortly. As Janice told us, the time is short. Basically, I have only 2.5 slides to show. The half slide is this one, just for enter the topic about the situation in Switzerland. Just to start where we started from. In 1989 to 1992, I had the chance to participate a training group in Switzerland where it was legal at that time to treat patients, and the Swiss Medical Society for Psycholytic Therapy offered at that time a 3 years training for 24 participants. And the training was over 3 years in 12 3-day workshop. And we also incorporated in this training experiences with MDMA and LSD. This was the one and only training group for the next more than 20 years that took place, because then in 1993, the license was stopped for these therapists to go on working. Then about 5 or 6 years ago, as we grew older and older, our society, we developed the wish just to give our knowledge, which was collected our decades, and we call ourselves, we now tend to get the psychedelic elderlies. We wanted to give our knowledge to the next generation, and that raised the wish to do a training group. At the same time, in Switzerland, the possibilities were growing to do research projects in Zurich, in Basel, with healthy volunteers, but also clinical studies. Ido mentioned those, work with LSD and now also with psilocybin clinical studies in Zurich. And that shows that we need more therapists trained. When we started the project, we do now in a group of researchers here in 2017, we called the work we do LSD treatment, not psychotherapy, because we were aware that we have not now a defined way of what we are doing together. We said, in some ways, we said, at the moment, we do a treatment which is not defined clearly. It's kind of black box, because we show what is the substance doing. And it will be only at a later time that we will investigate more deeply what the therapy in itself has for elements. And that was why we called it LSD treatment. And also the group that we were starting in 2018, then we called it not a training group in psycholytic therapy, but more advanced training for guidance of people in altered states of consciousness. That means we wanted to say what we are training are guides who will do eventually therapy, of course, in our compassionate use possibilities that we can do individual treatment, but also other professionals who will maybe guide healthy volunteers in studies. So we let that open. Also, we thought it was the first time now after this training group in the 90s, this first group we were then setting up was a kind of a pilot project. It is running now since 2018, over 3 years, and it will the content will be 6 3-day workshops. People meet over weekends, plus continuous intervention, supervision, and lecture groups for the participants set together in smaller groups of regional accessibility. We have also 24 participants. All of them are trained therapists, be psychologists or physicians. Just to make clear that this is not a basic education in the field. They should have already knowledge and training in a psychotherapy method and do that in addition to the psycholytic or psychedelic guidance. That's why we called it advanced training. So it's not a basic training, it's about advanced training. The initial weekend that was held, all the participants underwent an experience with ketamine and gong music therapy. And this weekend also was made just to make sure and clear if this candidates will fit to the training. And from 25, one was then excluded after that weekend, and the other 24 are now continuing the training until 2021. There are a few dilemmas going on with this training. And one thing is that we tried to get a permission to do also legal experiences with MDMA and or LSD and or psilocybin, because these will be the substances these candidates then will apply when they are doing or research or compassionate use therapy. This demand was then denied by the authorities because they said there is no way to administer these substances to healthy people. They are not patients, so there is not a reason for compassionate use. And what you do is not a research project, it's just an administration to learning candidates, so they denied at the moment. We are still hoping that we could get in some way a possibility to do that. I mean, what we could do is a research project taking in these research projects the trainees for the healthy volunteers and to investigate one or the other questions. But what we would like would be more a kind of naturalistic therapy situation to do the experience in. But that's still a vision. We have not reached that at the moment. Then what we also decided is not to give a diploma at the end, just to make clear that this being part of our training group will not be a permission to do any kind of therapy with mind-altering substances, because there is at the moment only this compassionate use program, which is in a way a very nice possibility that the Swiss authorities are giving these permissions, but there is not, it's not certain that this will go on for years and years. It's just an exceptional situation. So there is no certainty about that. And that's what we say, then we will not give a diploma for maybe a training that will not serve for any people to have the right of do and to apply what they learn. So maybe the next time when we do a training group, we hope that we can give a diploma because it's more a sure situation. Another insight is that, or a dilemma is that the training group now with 3 years is quite long. It's maybe too long. It's not possible to teach a sufficient number of people for the need for the next years. So I think we should be able to train more than 24 people in 3 years. And so we are thinking together also with the people from the University of Basel, maybe to start a training group that is more academically based on one hand and more shorter on the other hand. So for the future, I think maybe we will do a training group of 18 months or something like that. Yes, I think that is what I want to show you for the moment. And then I'm looking forward to the discussion after the break. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. Now I'll introduce Michael Mithofer. He's our next speaker. So Dr. Mithofer is an MD and a clinical investigator and acting medical doctor for MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. He and his wife, Annie, completed the first phase 2 clinical trial of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD in 2009 and a subsequent study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD in military veterans, firefighters, and police officers. They are now supervising therapists in the ongoing MAPS Phase 3 trials of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD, leading trainings in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for therapists interested in working on clinical trials, and providing FDA-approved MDMA sessions for research therapists. Michael is a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at the Medical University of South Carolina, is a Groff certified holotropic breath practitioner, has been a certified internal family systems therapist, and has been board certified in psychiatry, emergency medicine, and internal medicine. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Ido. It's really fun to be doing this with old friends who we've all been thinking about these challenges for a long time. So it's really fun to be able to talk about them together. I looked at the questions and that you asked us to think about, and the only one I have a definite answer for is how long does the training last? And that is, it lasts a lifetime. So the rest I'm not so sure about. But sort of the way I think about it is, I think there are kind of three aspects to it that Janice and Peter have really touched on already. But, you know, there's the empathic abiding presence that Janice mentioned. That's probably the most important part of the preparation of supporting people with these medicines, I think. And that's the part that takes a lifetime. So that's an ongoing part of this preparation for this, I think, is an ongoing challenge for all of us to keep doing our own work and keep noticing the aspects that might arise in us that interfere with that abiding presence. And, you know, that's an ongoing challenge that I think is kind of the heart of this work. But then you know, another part is, if you're working with people with a particular kind of problem, it's the support people, the facilitators or guides, need to have experience and training in working with that particular problem. So if you're working with trauma, the way we've been doing it, apart from the abiding presence and knowing about the medicine, it is very important, I think, to have a basis of understanding about the kinds of problems you're working with. I also think, as you mentioned, Peter, the you know, possibility of people using these medicines for self-exploration, that's a bit different, but it also, the same thing applies. And then I think the other part is the training. What at least our training focuses mainly on is learning about the basics of working with the kind of medicine you're working with, and the ways that can be quite different from therapy without these medicines. So I think, you know, each of those kind of arms is really important. And so what we've been talking a lot about at MAPS is, you know, our training that we've been doing it for about 15 years now in an accelerated fashion. We've trained about 900 therapists, or 900 people. Not all of them are going on to be therapists, and about 80 to 90 of them are MAPS therapists now. But we're looking at the other question is, like, what about the meeting the demand versus maintaining quality of people that are doing this work? And I think that's one of the big challenges. So, you know, our MAPS training has been pretty much focused largely on the third aspect of, you know, principles of working with the medicine, always acknowledging the importance of the other two, but assuming that we can't train those things in the amount of time we're spending, because our training is basically, you know, about 15 to 20 hours of online, 6 days of in-person, and then role play practice, and then hopefully the chance to experience the medicine legally, which we have gotten permission for. And now we're kind of fighting for extending that permission. So, but I think right now we're in the middle of trying to figure out how to ramp up the MAPS training program. And we're bringing on new trainers, but we're also working with education consultants now to help us give it a little more structure, so it's not as idiosyncratic, so it's more transferable for new trainers to then take something to start with and make it their own. So we're kind of in the process of evolving that as we're in conversation with all of you, because I think what's coming more and more clear is, I think there will be, you know, several streams of trainings to meet the demand. One is, we're going to ramp up our MAPS training and revise it and try to make that as available as we can. Meanwhile, Janice taking the lead, but other academic institutions are following, and there are quite a few academic institutions now that want to have their own psychedelic training programs. And that's really helpful too, because then psychiatry residents and psychology graduate students can start learning about working with psychedelics while they're in their training, their regular training. So that'll be another stream that'll be helpful. And then I think what we're seeing is more and more kind of independent trainings like you're talking about, Peter, and like Ido and Karen are doing. Ben Sess is working on one in England. And, I think there's great potential for other organizations to do trainings that also accomplish a lot of this. And one thing that'll be fun to talk about is, I'm aware that all of you are actually doing more than we are on the MAPS training, in that Janice has a lot of more background about psychedelics in general. And Ido and Karen's program, and I think it sounds like yours too, Peter, I don't know as many details, but they're much longer and they include a lot more training and helping people develop empathic presence and doing a lot broader, kind of covering all the important areas rather than just trying to be as focused as we are. And as you're pointing out, Peter, the trade-off, of course, is that it's longer. So I think that's where we are now, is trying to figure out what are the intelligent trade-offs, what are the trade-offs we definitely don't want to make, and how do we go forward? So I'm looking forward to figuring that out with you this afternoon.
Hey. So,
Ido, so we can still share Sarah's video?
can you put
Yes.
me back on so that I just say, am I on?
You are on, Ido.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We will be meeting shortly in 10 minutes for the next panel discussion, which will be a question and answer. So goodbye for now and see you soon. We are
Sorry, Ido, we still have Sarah's video, so we can still.
Floris, let's do that one after the break so that
Okay.
people can move.
Okay.
And then we can continue a little bit longer if we want.
Okay.
So we have a 10-minute break, or 5 minutes actually now. And see you all soon. And one more thing I want to say again is the poster presentations. We will be selecting the 2 best posters, and we will send out a poll in this evening. So you can vote out of 10 different options. So we look forward to continue this discussion in a couple of minutes. So thank you.
So should we just leave this room open, or should we leave and log back in?
Leave and log back in via the new link for the next one.
Okay, thanks.
See you soon.